It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview owner of Riding the Pine Sports Talk podcast, Jack Ridenauer. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Great to be here. Really appreciate you obviously reaching out and having me on the show.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in obviously having a sports talk podcast?
So I've always wanted to be in broadcasting. I've always actually wanted to be a play-by-play announcer, and that's actually my current job right now. I do a lot of play-by-play as well as public address announcing, but I've always wanted to be in broadcasting ever since I was a kid. So when the pandemic hit back in 2020, I realized that obviously wasn't going to have, sports to be commentating over or whatever. So I decided to find another way to continue to talk about sports, and I figured I'd start a podcast. And it was a slow start, but I definitely, as time went on, kind of picked up, and I started to learn different things, and I started to, get a little bit more efficient with things. So it was really not until the pandemic hit that I realized I wanted to do it, but I've always wanted to be in broadcasting.
How did you come up with the name of your podcast, Riding the Pine?
So when I played sports, I was not, the one that was starting all the time. And I often found that I always had really good conversations with friends or teammates on the bench, just talking about whatever it might be, whether it's the game that was happening, something that was coming up afterwards, whatever. And I didn't even realize this, but it's a little play on my last name with Riding the Pine and Ridenauer. But I also figured, I want to kind of bring life to conversations that are not really talked about, right? I mean, when you talk about players that are on the bench or players that are reserves, you don't really hear much about them. So I kind of wanted to focus my podcast around, those players that people don't hear about, people that, or athletes that aren't really talked about or interviewed or covered or whatever it might be. And so I said, you know what? I feel like I could definitely be an outlet for those that are underserved and not really being, talked too much, and they can come and talk with me, and they can talk a little bit about their careers and a little bit about sports and the programs that they play for.
Of course, what are some of the topics that you cover?
Really, it's pretty broad. I mean, I really try and keep it broad with the sports talk. I always highlight, basketball, baseball, football stuff. But it really just depends on what is going on and what's topical during that time. So, for instance, right now with the NBA playoffs being pretty, picking up steam and really off to a good start, I'll cover that a lot. As we get into baseball season, a little bit more, I'll obviously cover that. But if there's like big news that happens throughout the week, or or a story that I find interesting, for instance, probably not the next episode, but the episode after, I'll probably talk about the pitch clock that's been implemented into a lot of minor leagues and just kind of go into that. And a lot of it's just kind of sharing my opinions and thoughts about different things that are going on in the sports world. So it's very broad, nothing specific. And it really just kind of depends on what's going on in the news those, few weeks.
Of course, what are the main sports that you cover on your podcast?
I would probably have to say, if I had to give it out in percentages, I'd probably say it's 60% basketball, 30% baseball, and 10% football. Maybe more so 50% basketball and 30% baseball and 20% football. I really get into football once the football season obviously starts. I try to stay away from talking about something that is not really in season or is not really that relevant, just because I feel like it would lose people's interest. So I really try and focus in. And with basketball season being so long, I'm also a former basketball player and former baseball player. So that kind of allows me to talk about it a little bit more educationally. But, obviously football, I've been around the sport a long time, but it really just, it all kind of just depends on what's going on in the news.
Of course, with covering the main sports like football and basketball, do you also cover those sports that are non-popular, like obviously, and that doesn't have a lot of media coverage, such as women's hockey, women's soccer, and stuff dealing with women's sports?
I don't usually tend to talk about those in terms of just when it's me solo hosting or just, myself in a monologue format. I really like to try and bring people that are in those sports onto the show so then they can talk about their personal experiences. I feel like it is not very fair for me, or not really kind of the same feel if I'm talking about it, but I know nothing about those sports or I know nothing about those leagues. I'd rather have somebody that plays on one of those teams or plays in one of those leagues or plays one of those sports come on the show and talk a little bit about that. So I don't really get into sports like that are undercovered. I mainly just kind of stick with the main ones, but most of it is an interview based podcast. I do the talk show hosting in case obviously a job wants to hear me do kind of a solo hosting or whatever that might be, and just kind of getting into that rhythm of hosting a show by myself. But I really want to try and focus in on the interviews because I think that's really kind of the bread and butter of the show.
How do you go about getting the guests that you've had on?
A lot of the times, at least in the beginning, I was kind of reaching out to people that I knew, different contacts I had made. A lot of the times, actually, it was other guests that knew people that were kind of referring me to other guests themselves. So I had kind of a long, lengthy chain of guests that I was getting from another guest and another guest or whatever it might have been. As time went on, I kind of realized that's not an incredibly sustainable way of trying to get people on. So I've started to call the athletic communication departments at a variety of universities and just try and get in contact with usually the athletic communication liaison for whatever sport that might be. So whether it's men's basketball or for baseball or for golf or whatever it might be, and just kind of say, hey, I'm Jack Ridenauer. I'd love to have so-and-so on the show. Would love to have 15 or 20 minutes of their time. Let me know what kind of works and what doesn't work, and we can go from there. So really it's just kind of constantly reaching out to people. Sometimes I will message people on social media, but I have found that, it's very easy to ignore a direct message. I feel like a phone call is a little bit more of a nuisance, and people are kind of forced to answer that more so. So I try to started to go in that direction of reaching out to different communication departments and just calling and introducing myself.
Of course, when you go about that way, obviously, have you run into the parts where obviously it's not professional to cold call people and stuff like that? Or has it been beneficial to obviously call people directly?
I found it's been very beneficial. I have found that it's been really, really useful for me. I try not to approach it in a salesy way. I kind of try and just tell them, listen, I'm just trying to take 15 or 20 minutes of somebody's time. That's it. I'm not trying to pull any monetary value out of them. So, I'm not really asking for a ton. I have found that the email method, at first it does work, but I started to switch over to calling first and then giving a follow-up email. And I started to realize, I mean, the first day I started calling people, out of the 5 or 6 people I called in 30 minutes, I had, 2 or 3 answer. So I kind of quickly realized that that's going to work a little bit better for me. So I haven't really run into any issues with calling people. I've actually had a lot more success than I did when I was emailing people. I still did all right with emailing. But I often found that, just calling people and getting them on the phone and talking with them a little bit more kind of gave them a little bit more of maybe closure or reassurance that they were talking to somebody on the other end of the phone.
Who are some of the people that you've had the privilege of interviewing?
I've had a lot of people on. I mean, I've had, I started this in 2020. Tuesday's episode was episode 211. So I've had, a good bit of, 150, 200 guests on the show. I've had a lot of guys on ranging from, NBA, college guys, MLB players, sports contributors and sports personalities. So I've had ESPN's MLB insider Tim Kirchin on the show some. I've had Phoenix Suns small forward Cam Johnson on the show, San Antonio Spurs power forward. When he talked to me, he was on the Portland Trailblazers. Zach Collins. I've also had on, I'm trying to think of some other people. I mean, there's been so many that I'm honestly kind of drawing a blank. I've had the both play-by-play announcers for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Greg Brown and Joe Block. A couple other radio show hosts in the DC area, Kevin Sheehan for ESPN 980, Ian Fitzsimmons for ESPN, and a college football insider. And then just obviously a lot of minor league baseball players. Trying to think of some other guests that I've had on, but those are really the ones that kind of stand out for the most part. I've had Jalen Moore on the show. He's a starting point guard at Oakland University. He's led the nation in assists the last 2 or 3 years. Trying to think of anyone else. I mean, if I had my episode log, I could probably roll through it with you. But there's been a lot. I've been definitely very pleased and very fortunate to have the people that have come on the show share a little bit of time with me. But I would probably have to say the biggest one was maybe either Zach Collins, Cam Johnson, or Tim Kirchin, one of the three.
Of course, what is it like obviously getting those professional athletes and people working in professional sports? And do you go by the same methods of calling them as you do with the college coaches, or is it different?
So I have found that going about it with professional athletes, I know somebody that is very good friends with Zach Collins, who got me in touch with him. I know somebody that is good friends with Cam Johnson, who got me in touch with him. So, and Tim Kirchin is a family friend of my family's that I've known for a long time. So some of those were just already knows that I had. Now I have not really spent a whole lot of time trying to go after professional athletes, mainly because I feel like you will wind up spending a lot of time chasing your tail and not being able to catch it. So I have quickly realized that if I want the show to grow and I want it to expand, I need to find people that are going to listen to me, they're going to respond, and they're going to be willing to share. That's a big thing with me is, these athletic departments or these college teams, their social media accounts sharing the episode and getting it out to people. It's just free advertising, and that's how the show grows. And that's why I like to go through the communication person, so then they can say, okay, well, this guy was nice enough to call us, whatever, and then they'll share it around on their end. And, as a result, there's been a couple times where a tweet's been shared around on an account that's got 30, 40, 50,000 followers, and the episode's done really, really well that day and into the next day. So the pro athletes, I have not really tried that same method. I'm a big return on investment person. And I just feel that the amount of time that you spend looking and trying to get them to come on, it winds up kind of backfiring, and you wind up wasting more time and, twiddling your thumbs waiting for an answer.
Of course, what was it like obviously getting the Pittsburgh Pirates play-by-play announcer to make an appearance on your show?
So he was an interesting case. I had reached out to him. I was dealing with one of the local TV stations around here with some advertising, and they had reached out to me and they had mentioned, hey, you should maybe reach out to some of these sports personalities that are in the city, and they had said that Greg Brown was a pretty receptible guy, somebody that would be, open to doing something like this. So I did a little bit of digging and I went through the entire internet, found his email, and I shot him a little email and just told him what I was doing and who I was. And he was really happy to do it. I mean, he's got a really nice reputation around here in the city of Pittsburgh of just being a real, uh, kind of just personable individual. So I said, you know what? I might as well give this a chance. And me being a fellow play-by-play announcer, obviously at a different stage of my career than he is, but somebody that, I can kind of look up to and say I would like to be him when I'm older. And I'm sure he looks back, or at least I hope he does, and says, okay, I see a little bit of myself in this young man here, whatever. So I just reached out and I asked him, I said, hey, would you, mind sharing a little bit of time? And he was, I thought, way over generous with his time. I mean, he was so kind to he talked with me for a whole hour. I did not expect to get a whole hour out of him. I thought it was going to be maybe 30 minutes tops, but he had no problem sitting and chatting with me, talked a lot about his career, talked a lot about just the art of play-by-play and what he does to prep for games and so on and so forth. And I've actually been able to have him back on a couple times. And as a result, I've, established a relationship. And that's really, I think, a big thing of my podcast also is I want it to be relationship based, and people are kind of like, hey, you know what? I like this guy. I can talk with him. I've been able to, I mean, I can now, some guests I can text just freely and say, hey, how's it going? How's the season going? Stuff like that. And it's just kind of building those nice concrete relationships. So then, down the road, they can, help me out with something if need be, and vice versa. I can help them out. And they always, they know that they always have a spot on Ryan the Pine to come talk with me.
What is it like obviously getting professional athletes such as the WNBA players that you've had and the MLB players?
So Jillian Aileen was an interesting one to get on. She was a great guest. I'm glad that you threw that out there, because I completely forgot about her. So I had her on. That was another guest that was a really big name that the episode did really well, and she was, again, really, really nice to do the episode with me. She was referred to me from another guest that I've had. He knew her through playing overseas professional basketball. So he got me her contact information and I reached out to her. She was happy to do it. She was actually playing over in Poland when we did the phone call. So that was nice to do. But the MLB players that I've had on, a lot of them are people that know some minor leaguers that I've had on. So I really try and hone in on minor league baseball players, mainly because I think that they are one of the most disrespected athletes in all of athletics. I think that they are very, very disrespected in terms of the amount of work that they put in to doing something that they love, the return that they get back, and the respect that they get also. And so I try to make it a point that my podcast is a home for them to come and talk about and share their experiences in the minor leagues. So I have one gentleman that has been kind enough to come on the show many, many times, and he knows a lot of MLB guys, and he's just kind of thrown my name out there, and people have been, willing to oblige and have been happy to hop on. So again, really, it's kind of either mostly if it's a professional athlete I've had on, it's somebody else that I knew along the way that was saying, "Hey, I'll steer you over in this direction if you would like."
What is that like, obviously, having those people that obviously you grew up watching or even watch to this day come on your show?
It's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's very, very cool. It's kind of at times you do catch yourself saying, "Wow, I can't believe I'm talking to this individual," but at the end of the day, this is my career, this is what I do, and so I don't really allow myself to kind of get very starstruck, if you will. So I try and keep it at bay with that. And I try to say, you know what, this is another individual that I'm talking to. They just so happen to be a professional basketball player or a professional whatever. I'm just wanting to talk a little bit with them, share a little bit about their life. And, I'm not trying to look for, getting an autograph or, saying, "Hey, I remember when I was a kid and I watched," whatever it might be. Um, I know that there is a line of professionalism versus, I don't want to say immaturity, but just not really having that experience of being around professional athletes. And I know that with this being my job, I want to keep my composure and not sour relationships that I could potentially make in the future with professional athletes. So it's obviously really cool. I think it's really, really awesome. I mean, no question, it's my opinion, the best job to possibly have in all of the world. But I have to quickly remind myself that it is an occupation, and that I don't really have the same luxury that just a general fan would have at seeing somebody that is in the public eye and a professional athlete.
Who are some of your dream professional athletes that you would like to interview one day?
Um, I don't really know if I have necessarily a dream athlete. I feel like if I were to have like a dream individual on, maybe someone like Mike Breen, play-by-play announcer at ESPN and for the New York Knicks. I mean, he's an idol of mine in play-by-play. I mean, he's kind of a big reason why I wanted to first start, getting into play-by-play when I was literally, 8, 9 years old. So, I mean, he would definitely be one to get on that I would love to chit chat with. But I don't really have necessarily a dream person, because I feel like if you have like that one person you want to get on, then you spend your time chasing that one individual. So I try to keep it pretty broad. Anybody that comes my way, I'm just happy to talk with them. And at the end of the day, I try to remind myself, hey, you're just having a conversation with somebody. It's not that serious. It's fun. It's lighthearted. And, you're kind of driving the ship. You can pull out whatever information you want. So a dream person, I mean, if I did have to pick, it would be maybe Mike Breen, but nobody necessarily really in particular that I would try and want to have on.
Do you have any coaches, college coaches, that you have an idea that I would love to have them on one day on your podcast?
Um, I know that see, now I'm blanking on names. He was, when I interviewed him, he was Pat Kelsey. Pat Kelsey, who was at Winthrop. He was a great, great interview to have. He came on when he was a head coach at Winthrop, but now he's at College of Charleston. I mean, he's one of the best mid-major coaches out there, and he was a great guy to chit chat with. Really interesting story. Just young coach that seems to really kind of have this way of changing programs. I don't know how to describe it, but he's done a really nice job of that. And I'm trying to think of some others. I know that I was lucky to have Alan Lucky, assistant coach over at South Alabama baseball. I mean, he's been instrumental in developing some of the top infield defenses in all of the nation, some of the best base running teams in all the nation. South Alabama is consistently seen as one of the best mid-major universities for baseball across the board. I mean, to the point of competing with, Power Five schools. Those are the two that really kind of jump out to me. Um, Yeah, Alan Lucky and Pat Kelsey, those are two guys that I was very fond of and really enjoyed having on the show.
Of course, are there any college coaches that they might have been assistants during the time when you interviewed them that now you're trying to get them as head coaches?
Nobody that I can think of. Most of the coaches that I've talked to, they've stayed in their kind of same lane. They haven't really gone up or down. I mean, the one, like I said, Pat Kelsey moving schools, that was kind of the one where it was, oh, he's at a new school now. But I haven't had anybody on, at least to my knowledge, that has been promoted to a head coaching job.
What is something that you learned now that you did not know before starting the podcast?
Probably to um not force something if it's not there. Not force an episode or a video or whatever it is. I mean, in the beginning, I was just trying to get as much stuff out, reach out to as many people, but I've tried to scale that back and spend a little bit more of my time in terms of the efficiency of just how I'm getting guests, who I'm reaching out to, allotting time. And at the end of the day, this, as of right now, it's my side thing. It's my side job because, like I said, I do a lot of play-by-play announcing. I do a lot of public address announcing. I do some writing, color commentating. So that really takes up, 60, 70% of my time. I mean, I've got, six games in the next 4 days. I have a game later today. I've got a game tomorrow. I've got a doubleheader Friday and a doubleheader Saturday. So, it's a lot. And I mean, that's what is the main thing, the main passion of mine. The podcast is something that I love to do also, and it's birthed the love of show hosting out of me as well. But I do have to remind myself that, the play-by-play comes first and foremost, and whatever I can get done with the podcast comes second. It is hard to accept that, though. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm happy to just not do that today or whatever. I mean, for instance, like I'm probably not going to have time to record my Friday episode this week. So, first, or maybe it's the second or third time out of 211 episodes that an episode has not come out on the day that it usually comes out, a Tuesday or a Friday. So, that kind of bothers me, but I have to remind myself that, it's still a 93% clip that I'm shooting. So it's not really that bad. But yeah, I think just being a little bit more forgiving of not getting something out or not producing something or whatever it might be, and not trying to beat myself up over missing out. Because, if you miss out on something or you don't post it, it kind of builds up the intrigue and people might, start to like that a little bit more. So, I think the main thing is just being more efficient with my time and not being so difficult with myself.
Was it like obviously balancing, obviously running a podcast, and also, as you said, you're a color commentator and play by play broadcaster?
Well, it's nice that it's all in the same field. I mean, it's nice that it's all sports and it's all sports related. So it's not like I'm having to deviate from one line of work to the next. It does get a little tricky at times when schedules of broadcasts kind of come out late. The weather, at least right now, is an impact of things because of the springtime and a lot of sports are being outside. So, and not to mention, like, you've got baseball at my network job. We cover a college, so I do stuff for the college as well. And then another university that I do stuff for. So, it's definitely at times challenging, but because my schedule is so, it fluctuates so much, I notice that, when I have those down moments or I don't have games I need to research for, I can quickly go right over to the podcast and it's kind of a nice little filler, if you will. And I mean, I take it just as serious as play by play. There's no question about that. But, again, in terms of the priority, right now, because, play by play is my job and it's, it pays my bills and pays my rent and puts food on the table. That's going to take first priority. And that is my first love. But again, like I love the podcast. I love talk show hosting. So that's not going to ever dissipate. It's just going to be, as I work further into play by play, the podcast will go further. And it's just finding that ability to balance things out. But it's definitely a challenge at times. But like I said, I'm glad that I'm able to not have to deviate in lines of work and it's all kind of under the sports umbrella.
What are some of your future plans with riding the pine?
Well, I definitely, I've always got future plans. If I've got, every day I'm thinking of something new. Right now, obviously just continue to do day-to-day operations with the social media, new video content, episodes, so on and so forth. As time goes on, I would like to just fully switch the show over to an all interview base and basically use other offshoot shows. So right now I've got NBA Wednesday that I do with a friend of mine. We do it every Wednesday, and that's where I kind of focus in on basketball stuff. And then, once we get into baseball season, I would like to do something baseball oriented where it's just solely baseball, and then football season and so on. So eventually I would like to get to the point where it's just like, okay, I'm doing an intro, I've got a guest on, I'm doing an outro, and that's it. Something short, quick, and efficient, and I can just constantly have that coming out. I definitely want to get a blog up and running and a website as well. That's a little bit further down the road, but I think in the near future, definitely try and expand on, merchandise, figuring out ways as to how I can sell maybe some advertising spots, reaching out to local businesses and whatnot, and seeing if we can sell any advertising there. So really just trying to, it's 2 years in. It's come a long way. I'm clearly, still have a lot to do, and I have a lot of plans with it. But, I definitely would say a blog, merchandise, and eventually just having a full interview only type of style with, little offshoot other shows that, I have a show host with me that comes on and we talk about whatever. And it, goes live on the Instagram and then gets uploaded audio wise. So there's definitely lots of plans in the future for Ride in the Pine. But I would have to definitely say a blog and merchandise are way up there.
What advice would you give future people looking to start their own sports talk podcasts?
Do not be afraid to hit record. That is, I think, the number one thing. I remember when I first started, I was recording out of my closet on a phone. You know, you everybody has to start somewhere, right? And I think that's a big thing in society right now, is that people are afraid of failure. People are afraid of being the low man on the totem pole. But there's not a single soul in this world that has gone off and become incredibly successful, who started out on the top unless they were born into it. So as a result, I kind of quickly realized that you just need to sit down and you need to start working. You need to just start recording. I go back and listen to my first ever podcast, and it is not good. It is not good at all. And I will be the first one to tell you that. But you wouldn't know that until you first sat down and started recording. So you kind of have to get over yourself a little bit. You have to kind of get over your pride a little bit and just say, listen, if you love sports, if you've got a passion for it, dive into it, get into it. But I think the other main thing is just being consistent. I've had many people come up to me, and that's why I don't like missing episode date releases, but I've been so consistent over time that it's a lot more forgiving for people than if I was missing an episode every single week or every 2 weeks or whatever. I can literally probably count on one singular hand, maybe 3 fingers, how many times I've had an instance that I'll have on Friday. But being consistent, getting content out, and I think at the end of the day, just doing it because you love it. Don't get into it because you're trying to make a bunch of money. Because podcasting, if you want to make money and you want to make it off downloads, you're going to have to be really, really working at it. Where you're going to make the money, I have found, is in advertising and deals like that. So, obviously you want to get into it for having a passion and for a love. But also just, knowing like, hey, in the beginning, it's going to stink, but as time goes on, you're going to get better. That's just how it's a natural progression of things.
What advice would you give people such as ourselves looking to interview professional athletes and college coaches for their podcast?
Just always remember that it's just a conversation. At the end of the day, it's just a conversation. You're just learning about somebody's life, and never ask a yes or no question. That's one of the first things I learned in journalism school. You never ask a yes or no question. Always hit those who's, those what's, whys, wins, where's, all of that stuff. That's where you're going to really get the nooks and crannies of the story. So yeah, I would say just that, because it can be a nerve-wracking thing. You're sitting across from somebody in a voice calling or video calling, whatever you want to call it, type of format. So as a result, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but you just have to remember that it's just a conversation. It's like you're talking to a buddy across the way, and just relax. I think that's the biggest thing, is just relax and go in and know that you're about to have a lot of fun.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with your podcast app on podcast platforms?
Yeah, so the podcast, obviously Riding the Pine, it's out on all podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, you name it, it's out there. Social medias for Twitter, it's Ride the Pine 20. The R and the T and the P are all capital. On Instagram, it's at riding _ pine all lowercase. And then on TikTok, it's at Riding the Pine, all lowercase as well. I'm on everything. I post, Monday through Saturday, couple times a day. Like I said, episodes come out Tuesdays and Fridays. Going to always have, guest interviews on. You'll hear me in the first part of the show, and then a guest from any sport, any school that'll come on the latter part of the show. But yeah, give it a listen, give it a download, and be sure to share it around friends and family.
Thank you again, Jack Ryder, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with Riding the Pine, and look forward to seeing what the future holds for you.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. And good luck to you too. Appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Jack Ryder, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with Riding the Pine.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.